So I saw it a while ago. How many of you grew up in church? Raise your hand. All right. Yeah, many of you. How many of you church is somewhat of a new thing to you? Raise your hand. Somewhat of a new thing. All right, that was me. Listen, I didn't grow up in church. Like, I didn't even step inside of a church building until I was 16. I think some people think because I'm a preacher that I must have came out of my mama's womb with a Bible in my hand going, turn or burn, turn or burn. You know, I didn't. All right. Like, I didn't grow up in church. Like, I didn't know anything about church. The first time I went to church, I was 16. My aunt was an alcoholic, died in a car wreck, single car wreck, drove off the road. That was the first time I had ever gone to church, was to her funeral. It was on a Thursday. The following Tuesday, the pastor and a deacon of the church made a surprise visit to our house on a Tuesday night. I'd just gotten home from basketball practice, gotten changed. My parents were in the kitchen cooking dinner. I hear a knock on the door. I opened the door, true story, and I panicked because we had never had a pastor at our house before. So I panicked. I opened the door and go, it's the pastor, and slammed the door in his face. Like, my mom goes, who is that? I was like, it's the pastor. And she's like, what's he doing here? And I go, I don't know. And they start hiding things, you know, like, we didn't know, all right? And we're like, those are the family pictures, Mom, it's okay, right? And so they let the pastor and the deacon in the house right there in the living room floor. They shared the gospel with my parents, and I saw both of my parents right there get radically saved. Radically saved. Like, that moment, they became followers to never look back. Like, I saw the biggest change in my dad. My dad's just a country boy, good old boy, truck driver. He loved me, loved my mom. But he was also a very hard man, a very angry man, and he was gone a lot. And I saw his heart break. Immediately changed, began to follow Jesus. But you know what I did that night? I became a fan of Jesus because I saw what Jesus did in my parents' life. So this is what I did. Watch this. That night, I prayed a prayer. I repeated a prayer because they did, and I became a fan of Jesus. That was on a Tuesday. The following Sunday, we went to a church worship service for the first time. And dude, like, let me just tell you, like, you've been coming for a while. Like, when you see first-time visitors or you see new faces on Sunday morning or Wednesday nights, be good to them. Be kind to them. Reach out to them. Let them sit down with you because, listen, when we first come to church, you freak us out. Like, because we don't know the deal. Like, we don't know the rules. We don't know the way to do things, all right? So I remember going to church for the first time, 16 years old, Sunday morning, worship service. I walk in. They hand me a bulletin at the door. I thought it was the Bible. I was like, I thought the Bible was bigger than this. Because at grandmama's house, it's big and white, and it's like 80 pounds. It has like naked angels on the front, you know? And they're like, no, it's a bulletin. And then you go into church, and then a band comes out much like this, and they're smiling. And they're like, all right, everybody, we're going to worship. So everybody stand up, sit down, stand up. Sit down, put your hands up, put your hands down, turn around, hug a neck, kiss a baby, up, down, up, down, up, down. It's like P90X for Jesus, right? And then they did the Lord's Supper. And I didn't know what that was. Like, I thought the Lord's Supper was because the preacher preached too long and everybody was angry because the Methodists were going to beat them to Chick-fil-A, you know, or they're not even open on Sunday. So they were really mad, all right? But then they're like, the Methodists are going to beat us to the restaurant. So break out the crackers and grape juice, we're hungry, you know? Like, I didn't know what that was. And then they did a baptism, and because I didn't know what a baptism was, I was like, this church is legit. They got a hot tub up in here, woo woo, you know? Like, had no clue. But here's the sad thing, is that I was a huge fan of Jesus, and here's the sad thing, is I learned how to play the game. What I mean by that is this. I went to church every Sunday and every Wednesday. But my sophomore year, the end of my sophomore year, end of my junior year, I started going to parties. In fact, I probably became more of an immoral person after going to church than I did before I started going to church. Started going to parties. And then in high school, my Trinity was not Father, Son, Holy Spirit. My Trinity were sports, partying, and girls. Man, I would chase some girls. And they would run, and I would run, and they would run faster, and I'd run faster until I caught one like a wild animal and was like, I got her, you know? And then into my junior year, started drinking like really heavy. Listen, I didn't just drink to have fun or social drink. Like I had drank to get drunk, and then I would get sick drunk. I went from like doing that every once in a while to doing that every weekend to doing that almost every day to like literally like taking liquor to school my junior and senior year. Going into my senior year, I started smoking weed. Same progression. Went from every once in a while to every weekend to literally every day. From 16 to 21, I did this. I would bounce from girl to girl to girl to girl, move in and out of my parents' house for 5 miserable years. You know what's interesting about all that? Is I went to church every Sunday and every Wednesday and was a complete fan of Jesus, but was still living like hell. I'll just be honest with you, be transparent. There were times I would go to church on Sunday mornings with a hangover and a huge headache. There were actually times I would go to youth on Wednesday nights high. Be like, everything the youth pastor's saying is so funny tonight. High. There were times I would take whatever girl I was dating at the time, and we'd go to youth on Wednesday nights and we'd sing love songs to Jesus, and then we'd go find a deserted road somewhere. 5 miserable years. You know what's interesting about all that? Is that every D Now, every youth camp, every once in a while on Wednesday nights, my emotions would get stirred and we'd hear a preacher preach, and then a band would come out, and then I would come up to a stage much like this as an altar, and I would get on my hands and knees and I'd begin to cry out to God, and I'd say, God, I'm sorry. God, I'm going to do better. God, I'm going to follow you. God, I'm going to try harder. God, I'm going to fix this. God, I'm going to change. And notice it was all I, and things I was going to do. And guess what? I would get up from that and it might work. It might work for like a day or a week or even a month, but eventually I would turn right back to the same junk. And then the next youth event would come and I'd say, oh God, I'm sorry. I'm going to do better. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to fix this. It might work for a little bit, and then I'd go right back to the same junk. Next youth event, oh, God, I really mean it this time. God, I'm sorry. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. Go right back to it. It's what the Bible calls a dog returning to its vomit. This never-ending cycle for 5 miserable years. And people say all the time, the most miserable people in the world are those that don't know Jesus. And I don't think that's right, because they don't know any better. I say this, the most miserable people in the world are those who are sitting in church pews every week and still living like hell, because we know Jesus, we know with the gospel, we're fans of him, but we don't know victory and we don't know life change and life transformation. So we say, where's the hope for us? Where's the victory for us? 5 miserable years. God, I'm sorry. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. Go back to it. God, I'm sorry. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. Go right back to it. God, I'm sorry. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. 5 miserable years of this never-ending cycle. It was a rut that I couldn't get out of. How many of you have ever felt that way, or you feel that way right now? Raise your hand. Look at that. Oh my gosh, so many. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. 5 miserable years. But then, at 21, something changed. Something happened. We were doing a college rally at our church, and we had a speaker come speak at our church. His name was Mark Job. Mark Job is Carrie Job's dad, if you've ever heard of Carrie Job. And I don't even remember what he was preaching on. I just remember he had this huge sword, and he was waving this sword around, and maybe he said, come to Jesus or I shall behead you. I don't know, all right? But when he got done preaching, a band came up, and I walked down the aisle, got on my face, and I began to pray the same prayer I prayed 1,000 times. God, I'm sorry. God, I'm going to do better. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to fix this. God, I'm going to stop sleeping with my girlfriend. God, I'm going to stop getting high. God, I'm going to stop doing this. God, I'm going to change. And then, listen, something happened that night that was completely different than any other night. I began to feel this huge weight on my shoulder, this huge burden. I literally felt like my chest was caving in. Like, have you ever been under so much stress and anxiety and pressure that you couldn't catch your breath? It was like a panic attack. Have you ever felt that way before? Like I couldn't breathe. And then something just like broke in me. And it's kind of like what the gospel says, let those who have eyes see and let those who have ears hear. Because in that moment, like my prayer changed. And my prayer changed to this. Instead of saying, God, I'm sorry, I'm going to try harder and do better. This is what the prayer changed to. I remember it as clear this day as when it happened. I say, God, I'm not going to do better. I'm not going to try harder. I'm not going to fix this. God, I'm not going to stop doing those things. Because God, I can't. I can't change it. So God, this is me. So either you come in and save me and change me from the inside out, put your spirit in me to where I follow you and you change me. God, either you do that or this is me. So God, I'm just going to be miserable. I'm going to be in prison, or I'm going to die, or I'm just going to fake it the rest of my life and be absolutely miserable. So God, that's me. So God, I'm not going to fix this. I'm not going to change. God, I'm not. So God, I give up. I quit. I surrender. God, I can't. And listen, friends, I think those two words, I can't, are sometimes the most beautiful words God can hear. Because the first step to admitting He can is admitting you can't. God, I get up. I quit. I surrender. And listen, it was like for the first time, I felt this peace come over me. I felt like this huge weight lifted off my shoulders. And it's like I could hear the voice of God. Like God spoke to me in that moment, not in an audible voice. I don't know about you, but God's never spoke to me in an audible voice, because if He did, I'd probably wet myself and pass out. You know what I mean? But it's like for the first time I could hear God say this. Finally, you're mine. You're mine. Because you're quitting, you're giving up, you're surrendering, you're mine. And I'm taking over. And listen, that night, everything changed. Like, I'm not perfect. I mess up every day, but I'm different. I went down to that altar that night, lost, got up found. I went down that altar that night, dead, got up alive. I went down that altar that night, watch this, a fan of Jesus, and got up and was a follower of Jesus. Everything changed that night.